All right, now let's fill out the appraisal scoping checklist. But first, let's look at some plans and determine what the issues are. What we're looking right now is a summary of additional right-of-way from a set of highway plans. And we've outlined in red parcel 10SH and 10T, and the property owner is the Ribes. So the gross area is 3.99 acres. The gross area is encumbered with PRO of 0.1396 acres. The SH taking is 0.0465 acres, and the T taking is 0.0330 acres. And the blue highlighted area to the right show that the Ribes, who are the fee owners, don't own absolute fee. Other parties own the gas and oil rights to the property. The red highlight shows things that are going to be removed, and what we've got here is a stump that's going to be removed, and some natural wooded areas are going to be removed. And the yellow highlight shows what the T is for. It's for grading and driveway construction and some removal of some more wooded areas. And the temporary construction easements are for 12 months. And here is an aerial of parcel 10. We've seen this before in the PowerPoint. What we've got is a detached single-family home with a detached garage located approximately 100 feet back off the road right-of-way. And we've got a red circle that shows a box culvert. And according to the highway plans, that box culvert is going to be relocated to the right or in an easterly direction on the property. There's another circle showing a tree that's going to be removed. And then there's another circle to the left which shows more trees that are going to be removed in the SH and the T areas. These are the right-of-way plans that reflect the T area. The property, or at least the front of the property, is outlined in red. We can see that the property line goes to the center of the road, which means Ribes own the fee interest under the road, and that the road is there by a standard highway easement known as PRO, present road occupied. All right, the existing right-of-way line is shown as a dashed red line. The SH taking is shown in yellow, and the temporary construction easement taking is behind the SH shown in green. The existing edge of pavement is shown by a solid blue line on both sides of the property. And we are now showing the highway stationings. This parcel 10 happens to be in the area of Highway Station 120 and Highway Station 121. It's showing us that the taking is a strip take. That 10SH area is only 10 feet wide, and the T behind it is irregular in shape, but it's also small. On the previous photograph, the Google Earth photo, we were looking up the driveway at the house. We've just inserted a dotted red arrow, and that's the driveway going up to the house. And what we're looking at now is a blow up from the property map portion of the right-of-way plans for parcel 10. You can see that the house and the detached garage is set back somewhat from the road frontage. And to the right of it is a Google Earth photo of that property map drawing. And the existing right-of-way line is shown as a dashed black line, with the SH taking shown as a solid red line. Again, it's pretty clear that we've got a very small strip taking from this property. So we're going to review some of the things that we've derived from looking at the construction plans that will help us filling out the appraisal scoping checklist. They're going to fill in the existing ditch, and they're going to install a new ditch in the new SH area that's going to be acquired. That new ditch is going to be wider and slightly deeper than before, and the proposed depth of that new ditch is going to be 3 feet. They're going to remove the existing culvert, which was shown to you in the picture, and a new one's going to be installed a little further to the east on parcel 10. State Route 87, which is the highway that this property fronts along, is going to remain a 2-lane road, but it will have 8-foot shoulders to accommodate horse-drawn vehicles. In the area where this property is located at, you have a large Amish population, and there's a danger, a traffic hazard with the horses on the road, and that's one of the purposes for this project. State Route 87 is going to remain a level road in the area of Parcel 10. Let's determine what the whole property is, because in our analysis of the appraisal scoping checklist, we have to determine if the valuation problem is complex or not. And so we have to look at the whole, we have to look at the taking, and we have to look at the residue and compare those to make a determination or an assessment. So let's start with looking at the whole. The fee owner is James and Sally Ryby. They own auditor parcel 18-06-4800. That contains 3.99 acres, of which 0.1396 acres is encumbered by PRO. Remember the highway right-of-way plans that Ryby's own to the center of the road. So the portion of the road that goes over their property is standard highway easement, identified as present road occupied PRO, and that area is 0.1396 acres. The mineral rights are conveyed to others, they're subsurface, and they're not affected by the project. The Rybys own no abutting property. The property is improved with a single-family residence. There's no conflict between the whole property and the larger parcel. They're the same. In conclusion, the whole property and the larger parcel are the same, which is a 3.99 acre tract owned by the Rybys. All right, so now let's determine what the highest and best use of the whole property is. Legal constraints. Well, the first one is zoning. And here is the zoning from Geauga County. This particular property is in Middlefield Township. And note, there is no zoning in Middlefield Township. So there's no zoning constraints. The highest and best use, or the legal constraints, are going to be limited to what physically can be developed on the property and what's typical and feasible in the area. All right, there's no public water or sewage lines in the area where their property is located. Developing the site requires an on-site well and septic system, which it does have. Physical constraints, it's 3.99 acres, encumbered with a standard highway easement that's 0.1396 acres. There's limited utility in that highway easement PRO area. So the net usable area, if we take the entire site size, 3.99 acres, and we subtract out of that the area encumbered with standard highway easement, the usable area to the fee owner is 3.8504 acres, or 167,723 square feet. Property is 202.75 feet wide by about 827 feet deep. It is rectangular in shape. It's mostly cleared. There's some small wooded areas. Looks to be mostly level. It fronts along the north side of State Route 87. It's improved with a single-family residence and garage that's set back approximately 100 feet from State Route 87, situated towards the center of the site. There's an on-site septic system located far removed from State Route 87, and access to the property off State Route 87 is by a 12-foot residential driveway. The financially feasible uses for this property. On either side of the Ryby property are single-family homes. Behind the Ryby property is vacant acreage. It's partially cleared. Some of it appears to be farmed. Across the street is a commercial use identified as Middlefield Glass Incorporated. And at the intersection of Hayes Road and State Route 87, which is just down the street from the Ryby property, is a small cluster of commercial uses that includes an auto body and towing business and a small apartment complex. The primary land uses along State Route 87 in the area of the Ryby property is primarily single-family residential and small acreage tracts, surrounded by farming operations with a limited number of small commercial and light industrial uses that are interspersed throughout the area. The property is too small to be a viable farm operation. The property, if it were vacant, is adequate for single-family residential use, or it does have limited potential for small commercial or light industrial use. However, property is improved with a single-family residence that's typical of the area. It appears to be functionally adequate and in average condition, so it's not probable that the house is going to be torn down so the site can be developed with another use. So in conclusion, the maximally productive use, the highest and best use for this property, if it were vacant, would be single-family residential use or limited potential for a small commercial light industrial use. And as improved, probably is going to be the continued and existing use as a single-family residential property. The first taking is 10SH, Standard Highway Easement. It's a strip take along the property's entire State Route 87 road frontage. It's 10 foot wide by 202.75 feet long and contains 0.0465 acres or 2,025 square feet. Nominal site improvements are within this SH area that include a gravel asphalt drive, some grass and indigenous trees within the wooded area, and these are not a landscaped area. The SH is needed for drainage improvements required for the highway project. And 10T, it's a 12-month temporary construction easement needed for grading and drive construction and removal of some of the wooded area. The taking is irregular configuration, extends along the entire frontage of State Route 87 behind the SH area. It contains 0.0330 acres or 1,437 square feet. All right, so now let's analyze the impact of the SH easement to the residue property. SH easement is a perpetual easement that encumbers the residue property. Property owner is going to have limited utility in this area that's 10 feet wide and extends along the entire frontage of State Route 87. The highway improvements within that SH area are going to consist of drainage features. That is ditch erosion protection, erosion control with turf reinforced matting, and open swale ditching connecting to a new culvert and conduit. Water will be diverted from the ditch under State Route 87 to ditching that's across the street. The depth of the ditch is approximately 3 feet, and it's going to be slightly deeper and wider than it was before the taking. Ditch is wider, slopes are shallower, ditching is typical and does not adversely affect the residue. The pavement of the road remains essentially at its same location as before the taking. The road remains a 2-lane road, but it's going to have wider shoulders designed to accommodate horse-drawn vehicles. The residue property still contains 3.99 acres, the same as it did before the taking, but the PRO encumbered area has increased from 0.1396 acres to 0.1861 acres. The net residue outside this PRO area has decreased. Before the taking, the net residue was 3.8504 acres, and the residue, it's been reduced to 3.8039 acres. So there's a loss of 1.2% of the usable area as a result of this 10SH taking. The house on the residue is still far removed from the road. The setback from the road improvement is still about 100 feet, but when considering the new ditching improvement, the setback is going to be 90 feet. The drive access is enlarged slightly from 12 feet and is at the same location. The utility availability to the residue is unchanged. The topography of the residue adjacent to the road improvement remains similar, with a slight difference in that the open swale and drainage improvements are wider than before and slightly closer to the residential structure. If the site were vacant, the same improvements that exist now could be developed on the residue property. The residue functions essentially the same as it did before the taking. The highest and best use of the residue as vacant remains the same as the property before the taking and is single-family residential with limited potential as a small commercial use or light industrial use. The highest and best use as improved also remains the same as before the taking. There is no adverse effect to the residue as a vacant site or as improved resulting from that SH easement. So now let's look at the impact of the T easement to the residue. The duration of that T is 12 months. It exists behind the SH easement and is narrow with an irregular configuration. The T does not restrict access to the property, and it doesn't affect the highest and best use of the residue as improved or as vacant. So there is no apparent adverse effect to the residue resulting from the temporary use of the land for construction. All right, so now that we've got all that information, let's fill out the appraisal scoping checklist. And what we're looking here is the top part of the scoping checklist. So the first is the owner's name. And we got the owner's name from the summary sheet of the right-of-way plans, or we could have also gotten it from the title report. It's James A. Ryby and Sally A. Ryby. Next, let's fill out the county route section, parcel number, and project ID number, also known as PID. The county is Geauga County, and the acronym that we use for that is GEA. State Route 87. The section of State Route 87 that the project is on is 19.75. The parcel is 10 SH&T, and the PID is 23733. All of those we got from the right-of-way plans and the construction plans. And filling the form out, they ask appraisal scope, and they say partial or total acquisition. If we go to the right, it says choose an item, and if we open that up, our choices are going to be partial, total, or see comments. What we're going to do is, we know that it's a small strip take, it's a partial acquisition. Ownership is the next part of the appraisal scoping checklist, and the first thing to be considered is the whole parcel determined to be complex? Again, we get to choose an item, and our options are going to be yes, no, not applicable, or see comments. And so we're going to say no, that the whole property does not appear to be complex. It's typical of many in the area. The second question is, will an RE95 be required? An RE95 is a form used by the Ohio Department of Transportation. It's not required by law or regulation, but we use it to determine if any of the improvements that are in the take area, and we're talking really man-made improvements, if they're real property or personal property, because with real property, we appraise it and we will offer compensation for it. And if it's personal property, we will not praise it, we will not buy it, but it will be moved as a relocation benefit. So we like to know about those at the beginning of the project so we can make good project management decisions. And that's the purpose for the RE95. And in this case, they're asking the question, will one be required? The answer to that was no. The third thing is, will an RE22-1 an apportionment be required? And again, when we estimate compensation and the reviewer fills out the RE22, which allocates FMVE between damages and the part taken, sometimes there are third-party ownerships where different parties will own improvements considered to be real property, and that is the purpose for the RE22-1, is to itemize those out between the various ownerships. So again, with the RE22-1, they're asking us choose an item, yes, no, not applicable, see comments, and there weren't any issues there, so we filled in no for the RE22-1 there. The next one is title report, has non-typical appraisal issues, for example, tenants, fractured ownership, atypical easements. We've got the same choices for that one, and for that it's going to be see comments, because if you remember, the Rybys, who are the fee owners, do not own or do not control the gas and mineral rights. Those are owned by others, so there is fractured ownership. And so what we would do is we're going to have a comment that we'll probably insert in the explanation section. And that comment will be, the fee owner does not control the gas and oil rights. However, the SH taking does not affect those rights. The next part of the checklist is regulation. And the first question is, are there significant zoning or legal regulations that impact the acquisition? And again, when we choose an item, we've got the same choices, yes, no, not applicable, see comments. The answer is not applicable because, remember, there is no zoning on parcel 10. Second question is the property is not compliant with legal regulations in the before and the after? We've got a choice, And the answer with that will be C, comments. And we're going to put an explanation in there that there's no zoning in Middlefield Township, so there's nothing to comply with. So therefore, you're not non-compliant. All right, the third portion of the appraisal scoping checklist deals with right-of-way and construction plans. So the first question, are there significant improvements in the acquisition area, or are there improvements that are impacted? And the answer to that is no. Second question is there a significant impact to site improvements, such as impact to landscaping, impact to vegetation, impact to screening? And the answer to that is also no. Third question, are there significant utilities that are going to be affected? Well, are we taking a well? Septic system, are we taking a septic system? Service lines that are running to the property from utilities along the front of the street, are we severing those? Are those in the acquisition area, or are those things impacted? And the answer to that question also is no. And finally, the last question under right-of-way and construction plans are significant issues due to elevation change, topography, or floodplain. And the answer to that is also no. Nothing of significance that is impacting the property. All right, so next is the conclusion section of the appraisal scoping checklist. And the first question, parcel acquisition cost estimate, $10,000 is the limit for a value analysis, or is it $65,000, the limit for a value finding appraisal report? And so if we have to choose an item, our choices are less than $10,000, less than $65,000, greater than $65,000, or C, comments. This one requires a bit of an analysis. I mean, the right-of-way plans aren't going to tell you this. So how would one fill this out? How would one even have an idea of what the values are? Well, here's one way to do it. For this project, we looked at some comp ranges, and the comps in this area do range from $12,000 an acre to $28,000 an acre. So we've got a rough range in the area of where parcel 10 is at. And we know that the SH is 0.0465 acres, and we know the T is 0.0330 acres. So with this, we can actually do some estimating. So the lower end of the range is $12,000 an acre, and the upper end of the range is $28,000 an acre. So if we plug in the SH taking of 0.0465 acres and we multiply that by the low range, we know that on the low end, the SH is probably worth somewhere around $558, or at the upper end of the range at $28,000 an acre, we know the SH is going to be valued somewhere around $1,300. Next is the temporary. Again, at the low end of the range, the rent for the temporary for a year is going to be roughly $40. That's 0.330 acres times $12,000 an acre times a rate of return, roughly 10%, times 1 year gives us $40. And at the upper end of the range, that would increase to $92. Finally, site improvements. We know that there's some trees in the take area, and we're just throwing in a rough number of $500 plus or minus for both of those. So at the low end of the range, we know the total is roughly $1,098. And at the upper end of the range, the total would be slightly less than $2,000. Both of those are less than $10,000. So we fill in less than $10,000. Well, actually, I put the wrong one in. That's showing greater than $10,000, but actually it should be less than $10,000 an acre. All right, the second one, anticipated damages. Access, proximity, internal circuity, change of highest and best use, etc. Are those expected as a result of the acquisition? Well, our choices are yes, no, not applicable, C, comments, and we filled that in with a no. Third, cost to cure. Should one be considered? And again, we got the same choices if we choose an item, and the answer to that would be no. Fourth question, do we need a specialized report? Does parking need a report? Does drainage, circuity, and so on? Does anything need a special report so that we can adequately estimate damages? Again, our choices are yes, no, not applicable, C, comments, and we filled that in with a no. And finally, the appraisal format conclusion. And our choices are VA with review, VA without review, a full-blown before and after, an LS land only, with LS being a limited scope appraisal. Those are our choices. And so what we chose is a value analysis without a review. This doesn't appear to be an overly complicated valuation assignment. It appears to be very typical, very nominal, very simplistic. All right, so now we are in the explanation section of the appraisal problem, and we need to include discussion of any yes responses from the previous questions. Now, the purpose of the explanation section of the appraisal scoping checklist is to provide adequate detail so that all parties understand the appraisal problem. Put in as much information as is needed so the appraisal problem is understood. Excessive use of boilerplated words that have nothing to do with the appraisal problem are to be avoided. Here's an example of how one could fill this out. First paragraph. Before the taking, the property exists as a single-family residence with a detached garage on 3.99 acre site encumbered with 0.1396 acres of PRO, fronting along State Route 87, Middlefield Township, Geauga County. The property owner, who is Ryby, does not control the gas and oil rights. There is no zoning ordinance in the township. The area is rural in nature, with mostly residential along the roads, with some small industrial commercial uses mixed throughout the area. The predominant land use for larger acre tracts is farming. The Rybys own no abutting property. The whole property and larger parcel appear to be the same, which is a 3.99 acre tract owned in fee by the Rybys. Highest and best use appears to be 1. Land only, single family, residential with potential for small commercial and industrial, and 2, as improved, continued use as single family residential. The taking is 10-foot wide SH property right. That's a small strip take along the property's frontage with State Route 87. There's a 1-year T take behind the SH that is small and irregular in shape. There are nominal site improvements in the takes, which are small trees. The drive apron will be reconstructed by the project. Culvert running under State Route 87 will be moved slightly to the east and will still be in front of the property. The new ditching in the right-of-way will be wider and deeper than before. The taking has a nominal impact on the residue. Proximity of structure to right-of-way before is plus or minus 100 feet, and in the after it's plus or minus 90 feet. The site area net of PRO before the taking is 3.8504 acres, and after is 3.8039 acres, a difference of negative 1.2%. The septic system and well are far removed from the take area. Access to and from State Route 87 remains essentially the same, and the full movement turn remains the same. The ditch in the right-of-way is wider, a little deeper, having shallower slopes, and does not appear to adversely affect the property. Whatever uses the property could be put to before the taking remain with the residue property. Because of the limited property rights taken with the SH acquisition, there does not appear to be any impact to the gas and oil rights owned by others. The taking is nominal, and its impact to the residue is also nominal. The residue property does not appear to be damaged by the acquisition of the SH&T property rights. The valuation problem is rated as uncomplicated. The anticipated compensation also appears to be less than $10,000. The value analysis report appears to be the appropriate valuation format needed to estimate compensation. And finally, the last part of the appraisal scoping checklist is the signature section. And the first signature would be the agency. And generally at the district, it's going to be the district real estate administrator who signs that. And their signature would be above their title, and they would also date their signature. Second signature line is for the review appraiser, who would identify themselves and then sign above their name and also the date by which they signed. And the third signature is that of the appraiser who's actually doing the value analysis report. They identify themselves and their signature goes above their name along with their date. All right, it is time for knowledge check 4.